So the way that this is going to work, Dong has made his own tier list. I've also made my own tier list. The tier list is on the relevant content, so 915 classes. Put the limit at 20. Let's go 20 plus. This is your tier list for 20 plus keys. But we'll start off with the first one on the list, which is Frost Mage. My main, I put it, I mean, it's the best, I think it's the best range spec in the game right now, 4 Mythic plus. I don't particularly enjoy playing it that much. It's a bit of a one-button rotation, but it's pretty insane right now. It has real no weakness other than tyrannical high keys, where it may struggle on some bosses, but that's it. That's its only weakness. Double immunity, lust, all the mage perks. It's
curse.
Yeah, and I mean the funnel damage too. You know, the prior damage it's able to provide. Like first boss in Halls of Atonement comes to mind when you pull trash onto it. It's insane.
So Frost Mage is obviously an insane spec, played in the highest keys, great push, MDI. It fits in almost every group. It fits in every key level, except maybe if you're doing a 15 where the trash dies before you can farm back ices. It fits pretty much everywhere. It brings your mage buff if you're playing like a triple caster comp or even a double caster, which most groups at the minute are playing with at least, playing double caster, double intellect. I put Frost Mage in the A tier. It is very good. It is not required to do 25 keys. You can definitely do it without, but it is very good. It's especially good on certain weeks for your tank, for necrotic, raging, for all the slows and the kiting. Even it is a almost essential part of playing like Ret Pally right now to just help them not have to face tank the mobs as much, because they can put a 5-yard range between the mobs at the back of the train. So Frost Mage is super good.
A lot of positivity about Frost Mage. Why not S tier and why A? What puts it in A?
There are other specs that do the things that it does, and I don't think that it's a required class. I actually have very few things in the S tier. Okay. I think of the S tier as you want the S tier is like you need this class. Like you need to have this class in your group.
Yeah, sure.
This class does something that no other class does, and it does it better than everybody else.
All right. Well, I'm a mage main, so I'll go ahead. I mean, biasm is obviously there. I'd be biased to say it's S. I'm always going to say it's S. It could be trash, and I'll probably say it's S. All right. So next up, Ellie. Then where would you put it?
I put Ellie in the A tier. I put it middle, top A. I think it depends on the group, depends on the pulls. I think of Ellie as the highest overall damage class in the game. It just does damage. It has good AoE on burst, on sustain, long pulls, anything 5+ targets. Ellie's doing damage. Doesn't need cooldowns. Its cooldowns are impactful, but they're not super impactful to where you don't do damage outside of them, which I think is insane. Insanely valuable. Most classes, I'd say at least 60% of the classes right now, are all burst. And some of them do a little bit different kinds of burst, but they're mostly all burst. So to have, two classes I'd put right next to each other being Frost and Ellie that can do a little bit of burst, but really their sustain or their strength is in the sustain is like almost invaluable in certain dungeons and certain groups.
Yeah, I would agree in everything you just said. I mean, for as far as overall damage is concerned, they're sort of unrivaled. There are a few specs that could probably compete with it, but they bring really decent funnel damage. A lot of people think that they're still just pad, especially when you get Shade Week and that sort of stuff. But they actually do considerable funnel damage as well as insane AoE, and they've got really decent single target, right? If they run seeds.
So it depends on the build that you play with Ellie. If you take Seeds, which is their Night Fae build with Dreamweaver, they have almost no funnel unless you really want it. I mean, on a Halls of Atonement, Shard Pull, you could be Chain Lightning 8 targets and Earth Shocking 1. You won't do very much overall damage, but you'll probably do sub-rogue funnel into the Shard. But that's just not really the Ellie niche. Now, if you play Echoes of the Great Sundering, which is what most people will play, you have really good funnel. The thing people don't realize is if you're dropping your Empowered Earthquakes every 3 globals, every 4 globals, onto that shard, yeah, you're doing a lot of overall damage, but you are doing so much damage into that shard. Each tick of those earthquakes, you can stack them 3 and 4 times back to back, is like 6 to 7k on a crit.
Right,
And you can never get the crit
and to
back.
proc that legendary, you need to first
Earth shock,
right,
hit him with a
yeah, which is
15k
single
earth shock.
target. Okay.
And Ellie has not the best utility in the game, but they have very good utility. The thing that I think makes Ellie A tier over some other specs is they have a piece of utility that almost no one else has. That's their Ancestral Guidance talent. Convert some of their damage into healing. 25% of their damage goes into healing for 8 seconds. You do that whenever you're on an AoE pack, and it's like a way on hands on the group. Not to mention they play Night Fae. Their Fae transfusion every minute and a half to 2 minutes can be essentially lay on hands on 4 people. The only problem with Fae is it's a 20-yard range, so you have to make sure you're close up to your group. And it's smart heals. I've seen it leave me at 5% health and top my group members that were at 60, and then I die from it. So, but you have Ankh, you have Slow Totem, Tap Totem, Trimmer, Purge, the best kick. That's for all 3 shaman specs. Have the best kick in the game.
Yeah, that's a big one. The kick, right? It's really having that the quickest kick in the game is kind of a big deal. And I think isn't Astral Shift the best DR in the game? Personal DR.
I think point for point, it ends up being the best. Maybe like a Mage Mirrors is better when you compare it, but it's a 40% DR for 8 seconds on a 2 minute, which relative to other things, Bark is a 20% on a 1 minute. So depending on what you need, it can be seen as the best, and you're just naturally tanky as a male wearer.
Yeah, so. I think a lot of people thought that Ellie was going to be S tier, this tier, given how strong they finished the last tier with the uncapping of the buffer chain lightning and earthquake. But I think they're in a solid A for sure. They're really solid. Moving on to Havoc. Yeah, let's go Havoc. I play with a few. I haven't played any myself, but I played with you on your Havoc and a few others. I like them as a mage or any magic dealer just because of the buff they bring, and that's for 5% to all magic. Damage to your group, especially with the meta being 1 melee and then 2 casters generally, is huge. They might not be doing the best overall, but you just add 10%. You take 5% from the mage and the boomkin, and you've got the.
And if you play Ret Pally's doing a lot of magic.
Right, precisely.
And Tyrion Resto is doing almost all magic damage, I believe. I don't know how much of a Holy Paladin's damage is magic, but I know that for sure Ashen is a shadow damage spell. So,
yep.
Havoc, good consistent damage. They can be a little bit bursty. They do very good single target with their Mythic Plus build. I'd say that's their most redeeming factor. They have a lot of decent utility, an AoE stun, single target stun, imprison. I put them in the B tier. The thing about Havoc is they do a lot of things well, but they don't do anything well enough to you can't just point and shoot Havoc at a pack and have it blow it up. Havoc will burst with their cooldowns and do 30k, where a Fire Mage does 100.
Yeah.
So Havoc just doesn't really bring that punch to keys. You see them now doing considerable less overall than other specs. If they do about rogue damage, they're not bringing you rogue utility.
Yeah, no, well said. That's a big part of the melee niche, right? It's do they do it as well as a rogue? With so much that a rogue brings.
You need a rogue or windwalker to really be a good melee.
Yeah,
and not many things do.
Precisely, and we'll get to those other melee specs that in my opinion, are just absolutely dominating. There's 3 that come to mind, but we'll get to them in a little bit. I actually put them in A tier just because they've got great survivability. I don't like that they've got a 4-minute cooldown. That's rough. It's too long.
Mostly unimpactful as well.
Exactly. And Darkness is super underrated. I think Darkness is an extremely good party party-wide DR. And just the magic. For me, I can't look past the magic factor. Obviously, I play a lot of casters, and if I get a Havoc Demon Hunter in my group, I'm pumped. But we'll leave them in.
Well, I flex to a lot of things, but I main lock and shaman. So
yeah, we'll leave it in B tier because if you look at what sits above it, is it as good as Ele and Frostmage? No.
Like, do you want to swap Ele or Frostmage for Havoc? They don't really fill the same niche, but do you want to swap Sub Rogue for Havoc?
No, generally not.
Maybe on one day out of the 7, but I'm gonna pick a Sub Rogue over a Havoc almost any day of the week.
Yeah. All right. So we'll leave it in B. Next one is Affliction Warlock.
My other main, along with Ele. I originally was gonna put Affliction in A. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think Affliction has to go to B. Affliction, incredible AoE burst. That's about it.
Yeah.
Very lackluster single target. Not great on movement. Not great on low target cleave. Not really that great outside of their 2 minutes. In their 2 minutes on AoE, you almost can't touch them. I mean, they're doing Windwalker burst on their 2 minutes, and it's pretty easy to pull off.
Mm-hmm.
They're also basically unkillable with their defensives. Outside of that, they bring a pretty crappy res, a pretty crappy kick, and health zones to a group. So yeah. I think they have to go in B for that.
Yeah, I think. I mean B. I mean, I think you said this, or someone had said this in the past, that they're just a budget range Windwalker. I mean, yeah. It's very true. They kill trash. They absolutely annihilate trash. You get a PI in the group, and you give them PI, they'll break the damage meter. But that's all they do, right? They bring subpar single target. They some funnel damage with the whole seeds exploding business, but they're there to kill trash, and they're not as good as some of the other specs that are currently good at killing trash too. I'd agree.
They do the burst probably similar to Fire and Windwalker, but outside of that,
yeah,
pretty lackluster.
Yeah, and they're less versatile as a Fire Mage. Fire Mage, they probably burst higher in AoE as a Fire Mage, but Fire Mage can convert that into single target as well.
And even the thing with Affliction, their single target isn't actually terrible. The thing that's really terrible is their single target with no cooldown. Right. Which, I mean, a Fire Mage isn't good either, but Fire Mage doesn't feel as bad committing a 1 minute bust to a tormented mob as a Affliction does, committing a 2 minute Dark Soul, Soul Rot it into a Tormentor to do like 8k damage. On a boss, they don't do that bad. On a Lieutenant mob in the middle of Theater of Pain, or you do a shard pull in halls and you have to go to Executioner, you feel pretty bad. You're not really going to do 3 to 4k DPS there.
No, that's a really interesting take. It's important, right? Because there are some specs that do good damage. I mean, you think of, say, like Warriors, they do really decent damage just over, without cooldowns, and then inside cooldowns, they are. Yeah, well, yeah.
At least you do your shard pull. Okay, Havoc does 25k there. Affliction does 100k, and it looks pretty goofy. The thing about Havoc is Havoc does that on every single pack, no matter what. They don't really care about their cooldowns, and then they go to the Tormented Bomb and do 8, 9k because they don't really have cooldowns. They're just doing damage all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. We'll leave it in B.
Where would you put a Marksmanship Hunter?
Look, I don't there's a lot of like just hunter hate out there, or huntard hate, I don't mind hunters whatsoever. I think that they fit a similar role to like Ele Shaman, I think that marksman pumps, especially with Kyrian, they're really, really good. But they're the jack of all trade, master of none, they don't really bring that much utility. They don't bring that much damage. They have good single target, a decent single target, really good burst. But, I mean, I think the thing about this season is, like, while burst is really good and it's valued, I don't think it's as good as sustain. I think sustain damage is super good this season, especially with the way that dungeons are being pulled and that higher level 20s pluses. Sustain damage is really good. You're not pulling around those Fire Mages anymore. You're not coupling up. Yeah, it's more
there's like
slow
one spec to pull around, and that's Boomy. And if you're not going to pull around Boomy, you're not going to pull around anything. Mm-hmm. And you had brought up that point about Frost versus Fire versus Arcane going in the next tier, about if we move back to a prideful like Affix, does Frost remain good?
Yeah.
If you can't chain pull for their Ices.
Precisely. I think that's like if you were to change back to an affix like that, these burst class, which I think marksman is definitely a burst class. They have huge burst. Shine a little bit more. You know, you
And it's
pull
good. I mean, it's like a
20%.
5 target burst for 60k. I mean, it's
Yeah,
good damage.
it's really good.
It's high.
Yeah, and they've got. I mean, you've got two. I don't know if anyone's playing Night Fae anymore as marksman, or they might be. I don't know, but the mics with the antlers legendary too, like it's still super decent, right? Especially with the 5 target. I've forgotten how that works, but I know it's much better than single target on those smaller packs, like smaller tempo dungeons, like the TOPs and that sort of stuff. For me, I actually put them in C. I didn't rate them that high. I don't. The big thing with me is like the hunters have a bad reputation. Like they've had a bad reputation for a long time because of the player skill wise. Yeah, not because of the class, but because so many people jump. You get these people into your groups. They got really good IO or whatever, and they just don't perform. And that's where the whole Huntard meme comes from and all that sort of stuff. It's very much like a skill player thing, and I feel like there's a lot of lackluster players playing hunters.
Yeah, so I put marksman bottom C tier. I mean, terrible survivability. I mean, even compared to BM or survival hunter, kind of crappy utility. They have to pull out a pet and lose damage for lust. Binding was great, and then they nerfed binding.
Yeah.
So I feel like, along with a lot of other specs, marksman is like affliction. It brings nothing but the damage that they do to the group, and the damage that they do is fine, but still like so far behind a Frost Mage, an Ele Shaman, a Boomy in their cooldowns. Like they just don't bring the punch that a lot of other specs do. They are good in some spots though. Mm-hmm. When you look at MDI and Great Push, Theater of Pain, Miss a Tear and a Scythe, 5 target pulls, marksman was great. They would play triple. They would play like a quad physical comp with a Prot Warrior and a Windwalker and a Rogue and a Hunter.
You saw that in the MDI too, right? Yeah.
Yeah, like it was great. They do good damage in their niche. Their niche just isn't really mythic.
Well, it's just not sought after this right now in this current sort of seasonal.
Their thing right
fixes.
now is burst chains on Mythic Sylvanas, burst ads in P2 on Sylvanas. Like do that 4 target burst that they do better than anybody. Maybe not better than Windwalker, but most people don't do things better than Windwalker.
Yeah, and they're becoming quite rare now too. I see less and less marksman and more survival and beastmaster.
Yeah.
They're sort of seems like they're dropping off, and their marksmen are picking up these other specs, which is
very rare. I mean, you don't see them anymore. No. Hunters are even a little bit underplayed right now, I would say, at least in the levels that me and Slug play in. Me and Slug play with mostly a steady group, but even then, we have 2 hunters in our guild, and those are about the only 2 hunters I know at the minute. So.
Yeah, me too.
Moving on to Assassination, I think I'll probably have some hot takes about Assassination, so I want to see where you put it before I give my opinion.
I don't rate it at all. I mean, if you look at what's already on screen, I put Assassination in D tier. I play with one a lot, and he's good, really good.
Makes it work, but for how good he is, he could do other things.
No, if he just played one of the other specs, he'd be doing way more damage. My biggest gripe for Assassination is that they have to re-stealth every fucking pull. It's so annoying. It's really, really trolly. It actually slows the group down as a whole. It's quite literally bad on half the weeks. Spiteful, it's unplayable.
Grievous.
Yeah. Grievous bursting, it's really, really bad. It's
Prideful,
huge.
No matter what. Prideful every week.
Exactly. And it's Achilles' heel. It cannot the other mage specs, the other rogue specs, one you don't even have to be in stealth, which is outlaw, and the other one, it's basically the same. It doesn't matter. But with Assassination, it's such a huge flaw for Mythic Plus. So for me, I put it in D tier. I mean, I'm not saying that their damage is bad. It's not. It's good. But I mean, when you look at the other 2 options,
this is our first biggest group. I put them in top of B tier. The thing about Sin Rogue is they are the worst of the rogue specs. That is without denial. they don't do anything super well. They don't really do anything better than anybody else. They do good single target. Do they beat Boomy on single target? Not really. Do they beat Havoc on single target? A little bit. You know, they do good single target. The thing that I love about Rogue is no matter what Rogue you play, you still have Gouge, Blind, Sap, Shroud, Shiv.
Exactly. It's the Rogue utility that just pulls them all the way up. I mean, look, I think I'll put him in... I mean, how about this? I put him in D, you put him in C. Yeah, let's put him there for the moment. I'd probably rather a marksmanship hunter right now.
I mean, so Shroud is just so good. Shroud is so good all the time.
Yeah, I mean, just for Rogue utility, and maybe it just gets bumped up. You're right. All right, we won't harp too much on. Yeah, let's move on to survival.
You reckon about this? Sub and Outlaw, just while we're on the Rogues.
While we're on the Rogues, yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah. So, all right, Sub, my first S tier spec. I think you need a Sub Rogue. If you can get a Sub Rogue in your group, get a Sub Rogue. They don't do the most overall damage, but the damage they do is so impactful and so good. They're incredible. They do all the Rogue utility. Same thing as Sin. They don't have the growth silence, but they have the I'm doing 20k on a Shard of Palkias when everyone else is doing 100k, but I'm just pressing Eviscerate 100 times a minute into one guy, and it's dying at the same time as everything else, even though it has 4 times the health. Right. Sub is insane. Their single target burst is insane. They're out of cooldown damage. They're in cooldown damage. Sub does everything right now. They only don't do overall damage. Yeah, but that's okay because you pair them with other specs.
It's good to see them back because in Legion they fit the same role in like huge priority damage. Too bad they don't have Shuriken combo anymore. But they are still extremely good, and I think people are. You know, we've talked a lot about their funnel damage, but they have really good AoE if they just hit Black Powder too. I know that on those hierarchies, that's not their job and that's not what they're there to do. But they can do. They can swap it up. You know, they can do the funnel and the AoE. Ideally, you want them doing funnel.
Sometimes, like this doesn't happen. But let's say you pulled 15 groundskeepers and halls together. You don't care about prio on that. They can just Black Powder, or it's like the last pull of Miss. The last couple pulls of Miss. There's really not that much prio in that pull. Yeah, exactly. There's the one caster, but they all have the same health. They're just Black Powdering. Black Powder, Black Powder, Black Powder, 40k damage out of nowhere.
Yeah, and where they shine, is when you get those shards in, you know, halls of atonement and that sort of stuff. Yeah.
They double the damage. They beat Frost Mage, and that is Frost Mage's niche. Frost Mage just also does a lot of overall damage too. So let's take it around to Outlaw. I put Outlaw in B above Sin.
Yeah.
The thing about Outlaw is there are dungeons where you would want to play Outlaw over Sub. Yep. Like, it is good in, like, Theater of Pain. I'm pretty sure. I think that's kind of their one thing is, like, oh, it's 5 target cleave for the whole dungeon. It's 3 target cleave. Oh, get me in there. Blade Flurry. But there are spots where you want to play Outlaw over Sub. There is no spot you want to play Sin over Sub.
Yeah, no, I agree. I wondered too if they had an uncapped Blade Flurry, if this would have been, you know, the #1 Rogue spec.
I mean, it'd be the next spec in the game.
Yeah.
And I'll be curious to see what happens. Rogue is not in my toolkit, not in my forte of classes I know much about. I know that there were clips of Rogues doing insane AoE when 9-1 was in PTR with their Necrolord legendary, and ended up getting nerfed, so no one plays it. I'm curious if when you get that for free, does Outlaw become this insane AoE blaster that also does some of the best single target in the game. You know, I'll be curious to see what happens there.
Yeah, me too. It's a good spot. We'll leave it at B. Let's go on to Survival Hunter, and while we hit these other classes, we'll just team them up. So we'll go Survival Beastmaster, and we'll do it like that from now on. And if you
So Survival, I mean, I'm unsure. Maybe you know something about Serve. It does like best AoE in the game or something. I don't know. I've never played with one. I've never played with one that's good. The one key I can think of was like Aspires of Ascension 18. And I'm like, well, this isn't really the spot for me to see what Serve does. I want to do halls with Serve and see what it does.
This to me is definitely a unicorn spec. Like, there just aren't many people playing Survival Hunter, period. Um, I mean, from what I've seen, I've done a few keys in the 20 plus range. Not maybe like not even that many. We're talking 2 or 3 tops where they've done decent damage. I mean, I watch a lot of streams and watch a lot of Dr. J. He harps on about them being great, but I mean, for me, I'm just simply unsure. I haven't played with enough of them or know many people that play them to even
when
comment on
Gypsy is
them.
playing the next patch, we'll look back at
Well,
this
yeah,
video and we were wrong. But
there's a
I
lot
don't
of
know.
hype about Survival Hunter next tier, but that's a
Another
topic for
video.
another video. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I'm going to leave it an unsure. You probably
that
agree with
doesn't.
that,
I
right?
don't have any objection to that. I don't know what they do. I assume they might be kind of good. I think most classes right now, if there are 36 specs, I think 34 of them do overall damage. They just do good
Yeah.
damage. Like
Yeah.
it's just
For
the
sure.
other things around it that they're lacking. I don't survival. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I agree.
BM. I have BM in C tier above marksman, but it's mostly an unsure. I don't know. I haven't played with one in a while.
Mm,
I assume if we got some guys from our guild who played BM, we would be like, this is awesome
yeah.
because they rock at BM. But
I mean,
better single target, better consistent cleave. I don't know.
I play with tons of them actually. They're good. They're sort of like the jack of all trade, master of none. They do really good cleave, AOE, and single target. They have their moments to shine, but they're solid. I mean, they're good because they bring lust, right? So they're better than the other specs just because they bring
Yeah.
lust. They've got some good DR with their pets. You can obviously, if you're playing Mist and all that sort of stuff, you can pull through the walls and do a bunch of funky stuff like that. I don't mind them. I'd probably rather bring one over in I don't know, just rogue utility. Maybe, I don't know.
Rogues.
Yeah, probably still
I did a
rogue.
key. The best BM hunter thing I've seen recently. I did a Theater of Pain with a Venthyr BM. It was actually he cranked. It's like I guess a really good single target spec for BM. A lot of damage.
Yeah.
Aside from that, I don't know.
Yeah.
They're really out there for me.
Yeah, me too. We'll leave them at C. I mean, there's probably a lot of people in chat because it's a very popular class, right, Hunter? Like a lot of people play Hunter,
Especially BM.
especially
I could
BM.
be wrong here, but I think BM might be the most played spec in the game.
Probably. I mean, if you guys in chat want to, or in the comment section rather, chew us out for making some doozy calls, by all means.
Tell me
But
BM is like the secret best spec in the game.
yeah, the god tier spec, and we're just idiots. Bunch of caster mains. Shadow Priest next.
I think it's the same thing as some of the other specs. Jack of all trades, master of none, ish, decent single target. But even last year, from last year, I would have said they're pretty good. They bring like insane single target. They went and nerfed the single target this tier. I don't totally know where they line up. I have a group of friends that have pushed very, very high, and they pushed probably from 26 to 2750 IO with Shadow Priest. It must be good. It must be decent enough to do that. Aside from that, I put it like low B, high C.
Yeah.
They do okay AoE with their Searing Nightmare. They have some potential to do cool things with PIing your mage or PIing your warlock, PIing your boomy, but their utility is pretty lacking. They don't have a stun unless they talent it. They have a really crappy 45-second kick. A fear.
Yeah, and fear is trash, right? Like, let's be real.
Yeah. In 99 out of 100 spots, fear is useless. I mean,
yeah,
there's occasional spots you can fear something and it'll get instantly broken and it's just a stop, but fear can be so sketchy in certain spots.
Yeah.
If they were bringing the single target they used to bring, I'd put them in B firmly, but I just don't think that they do.
Well, I think the big thing about Shadow Priest, or at least the way it used to be, I mean, I haven't played one in a hot minute. I used to play a little bit back in Season 1 when Night Fae was the meta. But you had to spec into your AoE, right? And then you had to spec into your single target. And that was his biggest draw. So you would spec into, was it Searing
Nightmare?
Searing Nightmare? Yeah, that's what it's. Yeah, that's it.
And even then, that's the problem. Searing Nightmare isn't a lot of burst. It's a more consistent profile, but they will not do the consistent profile that Frost or Ellie will do, or some of the other specs on this list. They won't do the consistent overall. They won't do the burst overall. They won't do the single target. I mean, they're not going to do sub single target. They're not going to do Umi single target. They're not going to do different specs, single target build level of boss damage, and they're not going to do the AoE. So I think they're generally pretty weak at the minute.
I think so
Could
too.
probably use tuning.
Yeah. Again, I mean, I don't know enough to really comment about them. I have seen them in like Arden World, for example, in the other side. Crank the trash. That was the only recent key I did. That was like, whoa, Shadow Priest kind of pumps. But yeah, I simply don't know enough to really say.
It's one of those effects that it kind of does some overall damage, but it's not targeted. It's not funnel. It's not bursty. It's just kind of there.
Yeah,
so it's like, it's okay. You could definitely do high keys with Shadow Priest. There's one key, MBI, Great Push, Necrotic Wake. Shadow Priest is a literal requirement. Yep. So you can mind control the Flesh Crafters and take them into the last boss.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a gimmick though, right? It's a gimmick. Almost.
Never a live key strat. Like, you're never going to do that in a real key.
Sure. Alright, well, we'll leave them there. I mean, I'd agree. I mean, we're getting to some really juicy specs, so we'll move on.
These are some of the good ones now.
Arms Warriors
might have
next.
a differing take from you than Arms, but it's only because you play it, and one of our newer guildmates, one of my best friends, he mains Warrior. I've only really seen the Fury. I don't really know what Arms does. I think Arms is good. Arms is a high C or a low B. What would you put it?
For me, Arms, I would put it at like I mean, looking at what's on the board now, I'd put it like a really high. I'd put it a really high C. It's the only reason. Might have to
be. Honestly, I would rather have Arms Warrior than Sen Rogue. I mean, almost in any key. I've seen the Arms Warrior AoE. I know that it cranks in some spots.
For me, someone who's played a ton of Warrior, I think the damage is really, really, really good, especially on a 2-minute with Avatar, and you got things like Power Crystal that you team up with that. I mean, now that I think about it, I'd probably rather bring it than all the specs below it. The big thing about Arms is that it's got insane burst with Elite, especially if they play Kyrian, right, with the Elysian's Might Legendary. And what really opened him up and what made, Fury really viable and Arms, again,
uncapping,
was the uncapping and bone grinder, right? So conduit. And this really made Warrior exceptional. I mean, took Fury to a whole nother level. But before in 9.1, for example, I would have put him in A. They were so good. Like, the damage-wise, they're just extremely good 2-target cleave, extremely good AoE burst, and then they've got their single target is fantastic. It's really, really substantial.
So do they go above Havoc? They definitely go above Havoc. And I think they go above Affliction.
No. I would rather bring all three of the other specs, to be honest.
Really? The thing about Arms, well, Arms has a better counterpart, is the thing. It's the same thing with Rogue. We'll get to Warlock. It's the same thing with Warlock and Shaman, Hunter, Mage. It just has a better counterpart. Like, if you can play Arms, you could also just play Fury.
Yes.
Arms is definitely a really good spec in certain keys. Theater of Pain, Spires, that's their bread and butter. That's their niche. The low target count cleave.
Yep.
They're cranking.
For sure.
And I would love to play with Arms. The one nice thing, both Warriors, all three Warrior specs get a shout to Battle Shout. If you're playing in a group with, let's say you played Warrior, Rogue, Ret Pally, that's 3 people benefiting from your shout. In a crazy world where you were going to play like a Hunter or a Windwalker in there, get the full melee cleave, everything is benefiting from Battle Shout. It's really good. It's a lot of synergy there.
Yep. Yeah, I didn't even mention Battle Shout. I mean, it is a buff. Rally's decent. Die by the Sword is a specific Arms DR, which is good on, a few of the Lieutenant in Mythic right now. You can taunt off. So I mean,
And
it's all right. It's still
spell
warrior
reflect.
though. It's still. I mean, I don't care what anyone says. Warrior lacks utility, especially party wide
And defense.
utility and
Arms
defensive. Yeah, it's
defensive.
just. I mean, you've got things like pain suppression that is a troll because you have to use your rage to do.
D stance where you lose damage.
D stance, which is a troll too, and it's GCD. Yeah, so they're not. They lack in that department for sure. When you say compare it to like a monk or a rogue
Even
or
a
a
Fury.
mage,
I mean, even Fury does things better than it. So
Yeah.
Arms is good. Arms is a good damage spec. It is probably the right spec for Warrior in a couple keys. They have some cool things to do. Theater of Pain, Spell Reflex, Halls of Atonement, Spell Reflex. The Glass Boss, Boros, Cold Heart, Last Boss Inspires, Third Boss Inspires. They can
Yeah.
do cool things. Granted, all three Warrior specs can do those things.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, first boss missed. I've done some insane damages as arms, more so, way more than Fury, just because it's 2-target. That's the only example I can think of.
Phases,
Yeah. But speaking of its counterpart, Fury, I think we're going to disagree. I think we're going to disagree on where this goes.
I mean, I think it's A. I think it's middle to high A.
I think, for me, I personally think that it is second to Monk in DPS as for melee. It's the best. I mean, maybe, to be honest, it could even be the best. I mean, if you see these really high level guys, Fury Warrior is off the charts right now. They do so much damage. Like they do so much more damage than some of these other specs.
War, it's like I watched Dan the other day. Dan War from Method in Miss. Doing like 17-5 coming out of the maze.
It's the stupidest
and that's
thing
a live.
ever.
That's not chain pulls and pulling stuff through walls. It's just he's just doing that damage with the things in his toolkit, not the things that other people are doing for him.
Yep.
Fury is insane right now. I look to see them be one of the best specs next patch. I mean, they're cranking right now. It's funny to see how Warrior, especially Fury, started the expansion. I mean, all three Warrior specs even started the expansion near the bottom in all metrics. And you can reasonably play Fury and Arms now in Raid and Mythic Plus.
Yeah,
and 100%. Do quite well. So I
100%.
think they're high A. I don't think they go S, but I think they're high A tier.
I put them in S on my list. I put them in. I don't know if we would put the requirement on S being like does amazing damage is required. You know, very hard to do keys without one of these specs. Then if that's the requirement, like I would put them in A. But if the requirement was like this class pumps damage, AOE, single target, you name it, it does it, it'd be S. I think it's unrivaled as far as DPS is concerned.
A tier for not even just DPS. A tier for all specs is I think of the S tier as you need this spec. A tier, you can swap you can play any combination of the A tier specs together. I mean, you probably don't want to play Ele Windwalker. Affliction we put in B, but you don't want to play Affliction Windwalker necessarily. But you can put Frost Mage, Fury Warrior, Ele Shaman, Fury Warrior. Windwalker, Frost Mage, Windwalker, X other class. You can put the Fury Warrior into that group, and you won't even notice the difference. They'll do the same damage in the same profile. It'll be great. Yep. So that's why I think Fury is an A tier spec. You can drop Walker for Fury, and you'll do perfectly fine.
Would you put, as far as this A is concerned, would you put them before Frost, in between? Because to be honest, I'd probably put it like that. Yeah, me too. I'd rather bring one.
Yeah, they bring in most spots. The things that are really good for Ele are the things that are really good for Frost. Sanguine Depths, Halls of Atonement, Necrotic Wake. Ele can't really be touched in those spots. Same for Frost Mage. They're big pulls every single pack. Granted, Fury is rocking 40-second cooldown Elysian Decree with 45-second Recklessness.
Yeah, if you're able to hit things all the time, it's about 45. Just dumping rage constantly. Yeah.
I mean, in some spots, I've seen Fury and Arms doing more damage than I've seen other classes do in those spots. Done Theater of Pain with Slug here, and it's like, man, you did 11k in this Theater of Pain. Like, that's insane. we weren't even pulling around it, and you're just doing this much damage without any gimmicks. So
No, I think we'll leave them in the A tier just because. I mean, this one of those specs where it's just damage. Their damage is something else currently.
Damn it, DPS Warrior in a very good spot at the minute. Only looking to get better.
Yeah.
Historically, very well.
Next
Spec.
9.2. If everything were to stay the same, it's going to be in a fantastic place. Again, another topic. All right, let's get on to the two remaining mage specs. We've got Fire and Arcane.
Your best spec, I believe, the one you played the most since I've known you, the Fire Mage.
Mm-hmm.
I put them middle A tier.
Middle A tier. I put them in A too. I'm a big fan of them. They're not as good as Frost. They're not. I think sustained damage is better. Fire is good. Fire is very good on some dungeons. Sanguine Depths. Your high trash count dungeons. They're going to absolutely bang. Sanguine Depths, Halls of Atonement, those sort of places. You'll see your fire mages cranking. They become even better if your tank plays around them, like you did in Season 1. If you're able to get that tank to pull massive around your combustions, it's just exponential, right? How they perform in that regard. They're a little bit tankier than Frostmage. They don't have two icebox, I know, but they are cauterize is really good, and you play Dreamweaver,
and they have
Frost
Dragon.
Yeah,
Dragon. The Fire Mage utility can keep you in. Even going into this patch, even going into 9.1, you would see a lot of people putting Frost and Fire next to each other. Like, okay, Frost might do more overall damage than Fire, but DB, Ring, Nova, Caught, Block, Dreamweaver. It's like there's the mirrors, barrier, invis. There's nothing that Fire Mage in particular doesn't do. Fire Mage is like the tankiest spec in the game. They do everything well.
The big thing about Fire too is that it's versatile in the sense that it has huge AoE. Well, it's a burst class, right? So it has big burst AoE and single target, and it can swap it out, and it can do prio, if it wants to funnel into one target inside of a pack. So it's versatile in that regard. It can do it all.
That's where they go above Ellie and like Affliction for me. Is that Affliction probably does more AoE burst than Fire does in certain pulls. But you can't take your Affliction, sow the seeds into a boss and do Fire Mage damage.
Yes.
Or into a Lieutenant Mob, or a Raging Mask in the other side.
And Fire is an... It's that thing with Mage, right? And then they bring that added utility with Intellect, with Invis, the Immunes, all that sort of stuff. You see a lot of the guys in the high end. I've done it myself. You go into a DOS, you play Frost. I've done it in Spires of Ascension too. You go in there, you play Frost the entire dungeon. You get to the last two bosses in Spires, you portal out, you respec Fire, and you destroy the last two bosses. It's the same with Hekar and the last boss. On the other side. So and it's because it is so strong in single target comparatively to Frost. So I'm alright leaving it an A.
My thoughts for Fire is Fire almost can't do good damage because their profile and their utility is so good. I mean, you're always going to have, realistically, a mage. You have to have Lust in your group. Fire is an insane spec. They're hitting a little less hard than they used to right now, but Fire will always be good. If Fire can do competitive damage, it will just be a good spec.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like Rogue. Outlaw, if Sub and Sin, I mean Sin's not, but let's say Sub was a D tier spec right now, you would still play Outlaw Rogue. You're still gonna have Shroud and all the Outlaw stops. You have to have Outlaw, almost like you have to have one of the mage specs.
Yeah, I agree. We'll leave it there an A. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan. I'm a little biased, of course, but yeah, I like them. I still think they're strong. And the next one is Boomy.
Where does Arcane go?
It's Arcane. Yeah, Arcane for me, I think it's B tier. It's not as good as the other two. It's not as good as the other two specs. I mean, on some weeks and in some keys, it is, in my opinion, the best mage spec. I think in TOP, it's the best mage spec. I think in
High Tyrannical Mist.
yeah, Mist, maybe High Tyrannical Mist, probably one of the best specs. Tyrannical just in general, Arcane's really good. And I think Mist is a great example where Arcane shines because you've got the 45-second touches that even on fortified weeks, you're able to run in to each one of those maze areas and have a go. And it's a big go. And with Arcane Power, the burst that you can do single target and AoE, given that you crit, is probably the highest in the game. It's
especially
really,
in
really high.
globals. Like,
Yeah.
The thing for me, I like my sustain classes. Especially like in raid, I love my sustain classes. I play Ele, Havoc, Warlock, Enhance. I love my sustain classes, but the truth is, in keys and in raid, burst damage is almost always better. I like to bring one sustain class to my AoE, to my Mythic Plus comp, but burst is so good. Do all your damage, 4 globals, and then you can AFK. You've done everything you were going to do anyway, so if you die or you have to do a mechanic, it's not that big a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Burst
I agree.
is insane profile to have. So I think Arcane is great. I think Arcane is the same spot as like Rogue. If Frost and Fire weren't good, I think you would play Arcane Mage in keys.
Yeah,
It's just, if you can play Arcane, why are you not going to just play Frost?
The great thing about like Mage at the moment is all 3 specs are really good. Frost is definitely the best for a number of reasons. The big one is that it slows everything. It's kind of really strong this tier. But the other 2 specs are super viable, super playable. And Arcane, I play all 3. I mix it up, whatever I'm feeling like on the day, I'll play. And Arcane there's something about hitting 100,001 ability that's super satisfying. I don't know of any other class that's hitting for 100k, but Arcane does it regularly, and it's fun to hit that hard. Yeah, it's good, and of course it's the mage. All right, moving on. Boomkin.
The most, dare I say, the most hated spec among the players at the minute. It's on the chopping block to get nerfed, and probably rightfully so. It does what it does. It does better than anything else by a factor of 3. I mean, it's insane.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you put Boomy?
I put it in A tier. I put it at the top of the A tier. I didn't put it in S. The big reason being is like it's still a 3-minute, and for me,
tragically bad for Mythic Plus.
Yeah, 3 minutes is the tempo for 3 is really bad. But the big one for me is like it's unless you play around it, they're not very good. If you play around them, they're insane. Yeah, they and just the whole like I don't know. We play with some really good boomkins, and they're definitely. I don't want to put them in S just because of the 3-minute factor, and that the fact that like the whole comp has to play around the boomkin now. It's kind of like Fire Mage last season, but longer, and it's
like in certain groups and in certain dungeons, Boomy is definitely S tier. Like, you would rather have Boomy than anything else. But the problem is, this isn't Tournament Realm. You can't just swap to another class if you want. You're stuck. If you're gonna play with the Boomy, you're kind of stuck with the Boomy.
Yeah.
And then you get into certain keys. You get into Miss. They're insane in Miss because they can push the tree. For that, what do? They murder 5 innocent Tyranid Guardians in a maze pack, and then they do nothing for the next 4 rooms.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think it's just the thing with Boomy is it doesn't fit that well into certain keys.
Mm-hmm.
But I love to play with Boomy, especially if I'm tanking. I'll take Solar Beam, Root, Vortex, Nox, Soothe, Part of the Wild, Innervate, and Trees any day of the week.
Yeah.
Like they have
what a list of utility you just rattled off, right? It's like nothing quite competes with
utility that every other class has. Unique utility like Trees.
The only thing they don't have is a misdirect at this point. It's wild. They could do mediocre damage and still be, probably A tier, just purely for the utility.
And utility has bought them spots in the S tier. I mained Boomy for Mythic Plus last tier. Now, granted, maybe I'm not the best Boomy there ever was. I played with Windwalker and Fire Mage. I did no damage.
Mm-hmm.
I can't touch Windwalker Fire Mage. Even last patch, Windwalker was a very underrepresented OP spec as Kyrian. I couldn't touch them in overall damage. I would murder them on bosses because that's what Boomy was really good at, but you had me with a Vengeance DH, trees and beam plus sigil was really good. They were the only soothe. Like if you didn't have a rogue, they would be soothe. But rebirth is the best B-res. It's the fastest cast B-res. It gives a food buff. They do everything well, except overall damage right now, unless you very heavily optimize for it. So I put them top middle B tier, A tier. I don't put them ahead of Melly.
No, I mean, I'm looking at it all. I mean, as far as damage is concerned, I'd put them in there. But utility, I mean, I don't think the utilities. I mean, I don't know. The way that you're playing keys now, it's not like you don't have a boom kit in your group and you're like panic stations. That's not what it's like. So
last season it was panic. Like, you had to have it. You had to have Heart of the Wild.
100%.
But not anymore. You had to have trees in Heart of the Wild to play Vengeance DH, Holy Paladin.
Yeah.
Pride. But you don't need it anymore. So they've fallen off a bit. I still think they're a really good choice going into next year.
They're so good when you play around them, especially like their stock goes up when it's like tyrannical weeks, right? You've got those really hard bosses, like you mentioned Mist, and a few other even on last trash pack and spires on high fortified keys. Like they have still a very strong profile for some.
Or probably the two best things I've seen the Boomy that we play with, he's cracked. He's an insane player. Probably the two best things I've seen him do is you can take a 10 stack of the Earn buff into the second boss in Sanguine. It doesn't matter if it's a 23 on Tyran. The boss will die in the Booming Ramp.
Yeah.
Or, whether it's Tyran or Fort, you burn your Boomy CD on trash that was going to die anyway, that wasn't really that killing you. But he'll always have Boomy CD for the last trash pack in halls, and he funnels into the boss and Starfalls 50 ads and does 100 KDPS and kills that whole room in 20 seconds.
Yeah.
He does something that no other spec can do.
And
it saves an infinite amount of time.
Yeah. No, I agree. So we'll leave him there. A. So I don't have much to say about these next two specs and Warlock specs simply because I don't play any of them. I play with them a lot. So
more than he wants to play with.
No, that's not true. I really enjoy Warlocks. I don't have anything really bad, and I think, I think you play all three specs, and I think that they all do super decent damage. There are some specs that are better than others, but we will talk about Destruction first. Where do you put this?
As a Warlock main, I pretty comfortably can say it's my main now. I'm splitting time against it and Shaman, but I pretty comfortably can say Warlock is my main. I like it a lot. I like the spec a lot, but I have to put Destruction down in tier. It
really deep.
Yeah, there are some spots, and there are some niche builds for Destruction that can do really well. Destruction in reality is 5th tier Boomy on crack. If you can pull for Destruction Warlock, you can watch MDI this past season. If you can pull for Destruction Warlock, nothing in the game will touch it. It will do 10 times the damage of the next best spec. If you can pull big enough, consistently enough for Destruction to feed the playstyle, it's a looping playstyle. You need to spend soul shards to generate soul shards, to spend soul shards, do damage with your Infernal repeatedly, and if you can't pull around that, they don't do anything. If you can pull around it, they are insane. The thing that they lose on, just like the other Warlock spec, is they do this insane AoE, and they hit like a wet noodle against the boss.
Yeah, it seems to be a bit of a trend with a lot of the specs that are down in the lower ranks here. It's, they either got to choose between AoE, a single target, or if you don't pull for them, trash.
Yeah.
Seems
and
to
if
be
you can pull for Destruction, it's untouchable. But the pulls that Destruction needs are only possible in a few dungeons and mostly unrealistic in any setting.
Yeah.
You can, even in like Halls of Atonement, the best destruction pull, you can achieve it 1 or 2 times a key, and outside of that, yeah, you can pull around your destruction lock and it'll do 150k burst on the first pull, and then, pull to pull they do okay, but they just don't do anything better than anybody else.
Right.
And in reality, they do most things worse than everybody else. So,
yeah, I mean, from my experience playing with them with destruction, they're not really. It's nothing too memorable, It's it's just whatever. Yeah, we'll leave them in D. It's interesting that you put them there. I had them in D on mine too. So, there you go. The next one's Demo.
I put Demo in C. I put it above Destruction, but below Affliction. You could maybe make an argument to put them next to Affliction. Demo does a lot of really cool things. They're pretty untouchable on bosses. The only spec that's really going to beat them on a boss is Boomy, and in reality, they're probably not going to beat them on a boss. If the boss will live like a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and the Demonology gets back to their second ramp of cooldowns, their first set of cooldowns maybe does half of a Boomy CD, and then they get back to that second set of cooldowns, and now they pass the Boomy, but it's on a 1 minute cooldown. They can do really cool things. They do really good boss damage, good lieutenant damage for lieutenant mobs and tormented mobs. The problem with Demonology is it's not their lack of AoE. Their AoE is actually fine. It's the setup required for it.
Yeah.
You're going to need a track back to live 30 to 35 seconds. And in that window, it's like, do not talk to me. Do not make me move. Do not make me kick or battle res, because I need to fuel my tyrant so I can do a huge implosion at the end.
Yeah.
And in a world where the trash pack was going to live 35 seconds, Demo would do great. They would get a full implosion ramp, implode 25 imps onto 15 targets, and do a big 400k hit in one global. But by the time that you ramp that, you're down to 3 or 4 of the 100 mobs you pulled, and it's just a lot of it's long.
Ramp classes traditionally haven't been that good in Mythic Plus, right? They don't really.
It just takes too much setup to play.
They can do cool
things, but you can't just flip a switch and just blow something up. If you want to.
Playing with Demo, I mean, especially when you're on it, I enjoy when it's like a tyrannical week and you spec into Demo just for that. I mean, as you mentioned, the damage, boss damage, is very, very good. Say,
even a funny story, me and Slug did it was 23 Plaguefall one time, and your friendly Demonology Warlock PI'd and stood in the red slime with Lust on the first platform of the boss. I didn't think it would do that much damage, but when you burst 65k on that boss and you caused him to leap 3 times on 3 bombs,
and we wiped.
Not very. It was awesome, but it was like, wow, that really just shot the game.
Imagine the spec, if you give it PI and red slime buff, does so much damage that it will wipe your group. Do not bring Demo or a Demo that can pump. There was a fortified key though, right? Surely. I can't remember.
I can't remember. We could probably find out if you look back, but I can't remember. It was something. But it was very fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very unique to Demonology. Alright, moving on. We got WindWalker.
I'm dead topical here. Not much of a surprise there.
Yeah.
WindWalker burst harder than anything in the game all the time. They just always advantage.
I could say the same thing I would say about Fury, except higher as far as like damage overall and AoE burst is concerned, they're untouchable. They're quite untouchable. It's AoE with proc, untouchable. Nothing does as much damage as they do AoE. Nothing.
Even on like 4 or 5 targets, it's like
it's so stupid.
Now they're doing 80k DPS.
Yeah, it's insane. It's so dumb, and especially with like Kyrian Spears and Spire's Ascension. If they get procs, like some of the numbers they're able to pull is not. It's not fair for the rest of the the specs and classes out there just they're so dumb. I think like Fury Warrior, they're better than a Fury Warrior just because they bring things like ROP, like displacement. Like ROP is really, really, really good in so many situations. Diffuse Magic, Karma, uh, you know, they've got a lot going from Incap.
Mystic Touch too.
Mystic
If you're playing
Touch,
in a group
yeah, shit, forgot
that
about
really
that.
values it.
Yeah,
Whereas
I
an
put them
Ele
in.
Shaman, they quite benefit
I
from
mean,
Mystic Touch.
it's the same thing with like S tier, right? If we would say this class, I mean, if S were like banging DPS, who does the most DPS, in a meaningful way, these guys would be up there. I don't know if it's as meaningful as some of the other specs, but it does shit tons of damage. But I mean, in terms of like you know, in terms of must you bring one? No, you don't.
That's the only reason I put Windwalker like in A is like I would be perfectly happy to bring Ellie or Fury in its spot.
Yeah, me too.
They'll end up doing about the same damage. They'll do it a little bit differently, but they'll end up doing about the same. That's the only reason to put Sub in S is nothing does what Sub Rogue does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no,
to the level. Other specs funnel, but not like Sub.
Yeah. Well, not much to be said about that. I think everyone knows about Windwalker now. I think everyone's re-rolled WindWalker Monk these days. They're absolutely everywhere. Alright, moving on.
It's insane that someone who chases the meta, such as myself, I haven't logged Windwalker the entire expansion. I don't know. It's just not really been an appeal to me.
I mean, as like a class to play, I've got one. I play a bit. As a spec, it's like, I don't know, it's very unsatisfying for me. I mean, this is coming from someone who plays a lot of Frost. I'm not saying that Frost is openly satisfying. It's just like, I don't know, this proc hunting. It's like feast or famine with them, you know? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's fun. I mean, I find it fun out of this game. A lot of the enjoyment comes from winning. And when you're winning the damage meters, that's fun, right? And if you play Windwalker, you're going to be doing a lot of that, winning on those damage meters. But yeah. Anyway, let's move on to some of the DK specs. We've got Frost and Unholy.
I could two-shot kill these. I don't know anything about either of these specs. I haven't seen one in Mythic Plus almost the entire expansion. And I barely see them in Raid anymore, so I don't have anything to base what they do.
Straight up, I'm putting both of them down there because I have not seen one this entire season either. I think I played with one at the very start. I don't even see them in Raid. I've raided this entire tier, and the one in our raid group comes in for soul render here and there.
And
I just don't see DKs at all. Yeah, I just don't see them. They're unicorn spec. It's classy.
With the nerf AMZ from last patch to this patch, they lost the thing that they were doing. That and, about last patch, Unholy was insane. Unholy does very good execute damage. Sire was a lust and execute. Lust, pop Army of the Dead, spam Soul Reaper, and drop AMZ, and be the most valuable member of your raid group. None of that is present in the raid now. AMZ doesn't really do anything, and Sylvanas dies at 45%. So they lost everything that they were good at, and I don't even know really what that was. So
they're both good damage. I mean, I've done with them. I've done a few keys like sub 20s with them. They're super decent. I know Frost has a lot of burst, but I don't even have enough data or experience to comment with them. Maybe I might level one up and figure it out. But yeah, don't know. Leaving them in the unsure category. If anyone in the comments wants to fucking fill us in exactly how good they are and where you would put them on this list, please by all means let us know. But we will leave them there.
DK is one of those specs with Serve and even Destruction and Shadow and Marksman. I'm sure that they are just fine to play with. I'm sure that they do damage. Most things do damage now, but do they really do anything better than anybody else? I mean, Unholy had a niche at one point in the game of their uncapped AoE scaling like exponentially, but they removed that playstyle with this expansion, and they've not really recovered since.
Yep. Agreed.
A spec I've played a moderate amount in keys. That's more of a raid thing for me. Enhancement. I put it B, maybe low C. I heard Enhancement described perfectly one time by Dorky, that Enhancement is just a shitty melee version of Ellie. It does
Yeah,
literally everything the same, but just worse. It
yeah,
does okay AoE. The thing it beats Ellie on is it does really good burst and really good boss damage burst, but I mean they have the exact same utility as Ellie. They almost always play Night Fae, so they have Fae Transfusion,
yep.
but it's just a kind of a shitty melee that does less damage than its range counterpart. So
Agreed. I mean, I've played with a few, and I'm never impressed. They seem lackluster in both departments. Like,
well, the
boss
thing even
damage
is,
is okay, but AOE, cleaves, again, but I don't have any experience with them. I mean,
well, the
other
thing even
than
with it is
raid, no, I have no idea what they do. Other than put Wind
like
Fury Totem down for our whining warriors, you know what I mean? Like, that's
like
it.
the thing even when I was exclusively playing Shaman this year, yeah, I could play Enhance with you and Keys, but it's like, man, this kind of sucks. Why don't you just play Ellie? Like, you're just gonna do 3k more overall on your
Hmm.
Ellie. Why don't you play Ellie? Like, okay, I can just
Yeah,
play Ellie. It's fine. Like,
precisely. Yeah.
I have no problem doing that. That's my favorite spec. I love to play that. So,
I think this next spec we'll leave Ellie and D. I mean, I'd probably want to bring a Destruction Warlock over one just because I want to see the memes they do on the these 100k pools and that sort of stuff. So we'll leave
yeah,
it there.
their potential burst is just way higher.
Roll the
Their
dice on
potential is
that. Yeah. So Ret Paladin.
maybe an unsure, maybe a D. I don't know. Do you know
Yeah.
what Ret Pally does?
Man, I play with a few, and they're just 2 minute damage spots.
Ret
I play with
Pally,
a couple. I put them in like C. They're okay. They do really well in some dungeons like Spires where they're able to get those like damage ants. Mist, they're
Miss,
good. They're
maybe.
all right. Their legendaries like I don't know. They're decent. They
The only thing I know about Ret Pally is that they play Final Fantasy. So I
yeah.
don't really know what they do in this game because
No,
all
yeah.
Ret
They
play
play
Final Fantasy.
Paladin in an alternate universe. Yeah. Um,
So
they're alright. Good bunch. There's just not much to say. I mean, they're mythic. They're just not set up for mythic. They got an immunity and some
the
auras, but
thing
they're not.
about the funny thing about Ret Pally is they're like Holy and Prop Pally, but worse. They have Bop, Sack, the passive Devo Aura. They don't have like Aura Mastery Devo Aura like Holy Paladin, but they have Devo Aura, Sack. I think it's a Disease and Poison Cleanse, Hand of Freedom, Judgment, Rep, Blinding Light. Like they have all these good utility pieces, but it's everything else around it. And with the prevalence of Holy and Prop Pally, it's like
Yeah.
you just, you're just not gonna see it
Yeah.
played over the
That's
other
the big
special
thing.
stuff.
I mean, just looking at screens like these the ones that are like C tier below, it's just like it's either their counterparts do it so much better, or it's their counterparts in the sense that it's like melee or range that just do it so much better. Like an arms warrior is gonna beast a Ret Paladin, you know. So I don't know.
Yeah,
They're just and that's a really good example of 2 minute classes, right? Where
or even
warrior just brings
melee
arms
versus
brings so
range.
much more.
You would take in at least 6 out of the 10 dungeons, or 6 out of the 8 dungeons, you would take affliction in I'd even really in all. I think you would take affliction in every key over Red Paladin. It's
Yeah.
both a 2 minute burst class, but it's a range that
Oh yeah.
isn't up to 5 dungeons.
Yeah, but I mean, you're comparing a class with utility. That's why I compared the warrior. Like two classes, no utilities. They bring zero. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, yeah, yeah. No, I agree. They're super mediocre. That's what they are. They're mediocre, to say the least. All right, last DPS spec, Feral.
it's like Ret Pally versus Holy Paladin. It's Feral versus Booming. The
Yeah,
thing that is often forgotten about Feral is Feral has the same utility as Boomy. I mean, they lose a little. For some reason, they don't have Innervate. I get why they don't have Beam. I maybe get why they don't have Trees. Why do they not have Innervate?
yeah,
Other than
yeah.
that, they
Bizarre.
still have Soothe, Knock, they can take Vortex, they have a Stun, they have Part of the Wild, Rebirth, but, they can Stealth, and they're super mobile and fast and tanky.
Yep,
But why? It's like, why would you play Feral if you could just spec balance?
exactly. For me, I will literally, if I'm doing a key 20 plus or 15, I'll go out of my way to invite a feral druid. It's a bit of an ongoing joke where I really want to play with more because I simply don't play with feral druids. I played with maybe 2 in a plus 20 this entire expansion. Do
I
not
don't know
play
if
with
I've
them.
done a key with a feral druid.
They are.
I main druid at the start of the
Yeah,
expansion.
no idea
I don't know
where
if
they
I've
are.
ever seen.
Yeah, I don't even know where to put them. I mean, for me, it's just unsure. And if anyone like out there knows, I mean, I know they do I know they've got good utility, as you mentioned. I know they do berserk. Excuse the
Pun
pun.
intended.
Yeah.
Yeah, pun intended.
Single target. I've seen like I used to raid with one back in uh, Castle Nathria that would blast single target patchwork. I mean, how that translates into a Mythic Plus environment, I don't know because I never did any keys. But
Like,
I
I
mean,
think feral could be good. It's just
where Boomy's its counterpart. So what the fuck are you doing? Like, go play the good spec. What on earth
and
are you
even like
doing? Yeah,
it's like always
please
been like
respec.
it's always been just like budget rogue. Like if you're gonna play a bleed, even on this list, if you're gonna play a bleed melee stealth class, you could play Sin and be 100
Yeah,
times better than
it's just a
feral.
budget sin now that you mentioned it. Yeah, I mean that's a good
Like,
pickup on the bleed thing. I mean, any class that plays bleeds or dots currently it's not that good. You know
even
what
the
I
thing
mean?
with Affliction being a dot class, if you go into a Mythic Plus with an Affliction and look at their damage breakdown, it's like 20% dots, and then
Yeah.
it's all seeds, and it's the
hmm
instant burst damage of seed, not the seed applying corruption that does
Right.
really good.
Yeah. So we'll leave Feral there. If you have any comments or any ideas to correct Gong and I on just how good or how bad it is, let us know. Because if there's enough comments, we might shuffle some of these around. But we'll leave them in
I did
unsure.
I did rank my tanks and healers if you want to rapid
Yeah,
fire the
let's
tanks and
go.
healers.
Yeah, we'll go healers. I've got them all in order. We can rapid fire them. Let's go.
I put Disc in bottom A tier. Good utility, very interesting things they can do. Their damage isn't amazing, but it's not awful, and they give PI. So
Yeah.
if your disc does 3k DPS in a key, they probably did like 5 in
Mhm.
reality with the PI. They're not awful.
No,
I would rather have other healers, but they're not bad.
they're not bad at
Where
all. They do substantial AoE damage with their boon too. People forget that boons. Now that they're playing Kyrian, boons like legit. That actually pumps.
well, and
And
it's
as
like
you
we were
said,
talking about
PI's really
before we
good.
did the video. We're looking for priests for the guild. Priest, especially disc, is just it's almost a unicorn right now.
Mhm.
It's like all the good disc players are just already in their guilds, and outside of that, there's nobody. Nobody's playing disc right now. They all
Yep.
swapped to Holy Paladin. Like,
Yeah. Well, that's the big thing. I think the meta in that, or the perceived community meta for healing in those 20 pluses is very set on two healers at the moment. So people who have gone up to that level and are hitting roadblocks with priest or specifically this, they're like, fuck it, I'll just reroll. You know what I mean?
well, and
You
that's the
don't.
thing with disc is it's really hard and it's a really unforgiving spec.
Mhm.
So sure, it can do just as well as Holy Paladin or Resto Shaman, but it takes twice the work. So
Yeah.
you just go
And it
for the
struggles on some affixes, right? Like Grievous is not its best. Bursting Waltz, you've got a master spell. It's you don't have it for every single burst. And
it's still not perfect. You still have to
yeah,
heal them up, even unless you're
exactly.
the god of timing your master spell. Like you're still gonna have to do some residual healing, spamming your Shadowman.
And
I
they
assume Disc is pretty good this tier with the Executioner mana
Mhm.
power and the Incinerator haste power, but I haven't played it. I haven't played with it, so I
I
couldn't.
I will
couldn't
say when Dispree signs up, like I'm not, and I'm
I'm
looking,
not mad about
forming
it.
a group. No, I'm cool with bringing a disc. Fortitude too. We didn't even
But
mention that. Fort, while pretty average, it's still a buff. Um, yeah, I mean, the Discus always had the same problems, right? They were way better back in Legion and in BFA, especially starter BFA when they fucking pumped. They actually did damage. Now they don't even do damage. You know, they don't do meaningful damage, not like Pally damage or uh, Shaman
Resto.
damage. Yeah, they're just
That's
not.
the
They're just
problem
not there.
too. Is they should do damage. I mean, that's
Yeah,
my
hundred
problem having
percent.
the healers at the minute. I'm a little sick of seeing Holy Paladin being meta, but in reality, Holy Paladin, Disc Priest, and Mistweaver should just do damage. They
Yeah,
have to melee, or they have to do damage to even do their
to
healing
heal.
rotation.
Yeah,
Holy Priest, I don't think, like, it's our next one. I don't think Holy Priest should do no damage, but they probably shouldn't do as much damage as Disc, and in
yeah,
reality, I think they probably shake out about the same if you're really
yeah,
trying to do damage.
yeah. I
And it's
agree.
not Holy is so good, it's that Disc is so low.
Yeah,
I put Holy I don't put any healer below the B tier. You can absolutely do any key with any healer. If
yeah.
they're good,
Agreed.
you can do it. I mean, we play with Mistweaver almost exclusively.
Hmm.
You can do any key with any healer if you're good.
I don't mind
Holy,
Holy. I really don't.
they
I
do
don't mind
some
them all.
things well.
They're fine.
Yeah.
I mean, they
So
like. I would rather a disc priest just because their offensiveness is like better for timing keys, right? Like because of the way they heal and they're incentivized to do damage to heal. They're better for your comp overall generally because they're going to be adding to that DPS. Because you're going to get some healers, even the higher keys, that just heal and they won't help, right? Whereas this, you know that's never going to be the case with the disc priest. They're always going to have to at least help a
they
little bit.
have to.
Yeah,
Holy Paladin, like they have to do it. It's
exactly.
not. That's the thing with like Holy Paladin being so good. It's not a function of Holy Paladin just does too much damage. It does just do too much damage, but it doesn't matter. They have to. I mean,
Yeah,
short of not pressing Consecrate, they're just gonna do the damage anyway. They don't really have a choice. So
yeah, agreed.
it's where I put another healer, my old main from BFA that I wish was a little bit better, but I still
Yep.
put him middle A tier. I put him behind Holy Paladin and Resto Shaman. Resto Druid is very good at the minute. Resto
I
Druid playing Tyrion is very
I
strong.
think the only reason I put him in front of like a disc priest right now and a holy priest is because of the buff factor here, right? Like I would go playing a lot of mage. I would go ahead and say that Kyrian, Kindred Spirits, is better than Pia in almost every situation. I would
I think
rather
it is.
Kindred.
I think it is in every spot. It's the only spot that I think it. If let me think of a spec. The only time where I think it's probably not better is like if you're a Venthy or Boomy, crit is definitely good for
Oh yeah,
Boomy. In their
yeah,
ramp,
yeah,
getting 16 crit at the end of their ramp. I don't know. That could push them to a break point where they crit every Star Surge. But in that spot, you'd probably rather have. I think a Boomy would rather have the PI than the 16 crit.
Mhm.
But if you're a Night Fae Warlock, a Night Fae Fire Mage, I mean, give me 8% crit all the time and
Yeah,
16 to 25 crit, given that it's a 1 minute cooldown, ain't that much of a
yeah.
difference.
I mean,
Give
especially
me
because it's 8% baseline on one of your secondaries, isn't it? It's that high,
it.
if I remember
It's
correctly.
8% for Night Fae, or
It's
it's 8% for all
so
the specs,
stupid. Yeah,
and it's haste for Night Fae, and
yeah,
the Druid wants haste anyway. The Night Fae or the Kyrian Druid wants to get haste. I
yeah.
think there's to a certain level in high keys. Maybe they bond a Necro Lord now because they want the 8% burst for survivability, and it 8% burst and 8% haste probably end up doing about the same damage. But
Hmm.
you even think about how crazy it is. You bond your Necrolord Windwalker and you give him 16% damage for every Bone Dust
It's
brew.
insane. It's so
It
stupid.
If the Resto Druid does 3k overall, how much are they really doing? I mean, are they
Exactly.
doing 5 or 6k overall?
Yeah,
They might be. Like,
yeah, yeah, really, yeah. And it's so strong because it's like it's better than PI in that regard because it's more versatile, right? And it's on the 1 minute timer. So
yeah, even like 40 second. I
yeah,
think it could be like 30. They have a conduit that baseline reduces it to like 45 seconds, and then you play Brawn. You
hmm,
you wouldn't really ever desync it from your 1 minute Bone Dust, your 1 minute Soul Rot, your 1 minute Combust, 1 minute Shifting Power, but still, like it's really good. You
yeah,
know,
I agree.
I
Agreed.
love Resto Druid. I love to see that they're doing good things again. And the thing about Resto Druid, the disc or other Holy Paladin, their throughput is really good. Their healing throughput's really strong.
Yep.
So
Yeah, 100%. It's a little bit weaker than it has been traditionally, especially season 1, but we're past that now. But I feel like it's a bit of a shadow of itself from BFA, especially now that they don't even run things like photosynthesis anymore, which is kind of sad to see that go. So yeah, I think as the season goes, as the expansion goes on, they get more secondaries maybe and some second legendaries. They might really shine. But we'll leave them there in A. Another spec you know lots about. I've played a ton too back in season 1. Is Resto Druid. Sorry,
like I
Resto
said,
Shaman.
we can rapid fire these. I put Resto Shaman and Holy Paladin top of A tier. I just put them away from the DPS. You can if they have their own comps that they're good in, but Resto Shaman and Holy Paladin equally good for different reasons. They do different damage profiles, but I personally prefer a Resto Shaman for the healing throughput, and then they give that consistent AoE damage.
Mm-hmm.
Holy Paladin can be better for that burst single target, and their utility is a little better, but both super good options right now. You can get away with either one and be super happy. And the Shaman, you just don't have to have a mage for Lust.
Yeah.
So.
I think the only weak point in the Pally toolkit is that they lack throughput without the whole Ashen Hollow down, but otherwise they're kind of like flawless at the moment. But yeah, I agree. What about Mistweaver?
I put him above Holy Priest. I mean, I'd rather have a Mistweaver than a Holy Priest. In reality, I mean, we play with a quite exceptional Mistweaver. He tries his hardest to do his 1,000 overall DPS. I mean, the thing just doesn't do damage.
No, yeah, it really doesn't do any damage. Maybe next season. No, I mean, their throughput's unparalleled. He can heal through, or monks can heal through absolutely anything. So if you're looking for a throughput healer, definitely get him. If you're looking for damage healer, don't bring on.
And I mean, if you're insistent on having a monk in the group, they still have Rop, Leg Sweep, Mystic Touch, Diffuse, Incap, Tiger's Lust, very, very good ability in some spots. So they're good. Of course. I mean, they're not bad. They're just a cut below Resto Druid, Resto Shaman, and Holy Paladin. And I kind of think they just always will be. They're just not really. And
their toolkit's not great either. You know, like what the fuck is Cocoon? Like, what is that cooldown? Useless.
Cocoon is like a 2-minute 45k shield.
Yeah,
it feels
absolutely
amazing
useless.
When you play like Blood DK and you Death Strike and get like a 60k shield, and then he life cocoons you and it does like less than a Death Strike.
Yeah.
Really wish this was an Iron Mark right now.
Yeah,
really wish this was a black.
No DR they can give away. I mean, Shaman doesn't have one either, but they've got so many other buttons.
And I mean, you got Link. In worst case scenario, you can always link your tank. So.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, so let's leave that there and then quickly shoot off these. This video's definitely dragging on, so we'll do the next.
Then we get fun. We'll do Prot, Pally, Bear, Brewmaster, Vengeance, all right next to each other, all good, all do really good things differently. They're great.
Where would you put them?
All in A tier. I don't put any of those tanks below A tier.
Brew.
The tanks are so incredibly balanced right now.
Yeah.
And then I put Prot, Warrior, and Blood DK just a step below them in B tier, and you can absolutely if you're an owner Prot Warrior, you can do just as well as a Bear.
Yep. I agree. I think I'm not even gonna. Maybe the tanks might be for another video. I mean, I don't play much tank other than Prot Warrior, and Prot Warrior does have some really good dungeons. TOP and Mist come to mind. But they're not good in anything else. Generally, they're kind of weak. As for the other tanks, simply don't play them. I mean, I play with them, and I love. There's not a tank in the game that I'm like, oh fuck, you know what I mean? It just doesn't come. I mean, it doesn't happen.
Blood is the biggest one to get that shout. The Blood is awesome. Grips and slows and AMS, AMZ, they're great. The problem with Blood is they can't hold threat off anything, especially off our warrior player here. Or even, I'll play and then I'll do my ramp and I'll do like 2k DPS and then I'll seed 3 times and I'm doing 50k and I'm like, I'm dead.
The big thing The big thing about the Blood TK though, too, like shout out to them, is that if you ever get them in your groups, they're signing up to your 20s and 22s, 23s, whatever, or higher. They're usually really fucking good because they took, it takes a hell of a long time and perseverance to get a Blood TK that high, right? Same with Warrior. I mean, not so much Warrior because you can cheat the IO going DPS, but Blood, like, I mean, they got to be pretty passionate about the spec to get there, and I understand it's pretty fun. So,
And it's the same with like Brewmaster. Like if you see a high rated Brewmaster, invite him. People aren't seeking out Brewmaster. So if you see one that's here's good, he probably is good.
yeah,
You know, it's
sure.
a bit of a niche spec and it does things really well. It's not the same as your Vengeance and your Prop Valley right now, where you can't get carried to high IO, but if they see a Prop Valley that's geared and decent IO, they're like, oh, I'll just invite him because it's Prop Valley. He's gonna be good, you know. But you see a Blood DK and you're like, oh, he's 2600. You're like, oh, this guy is probably an owner. Like, he's grinded his way up. He's had to do the keys. He's had to put his work in to get that IO. So
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, I mean, I think the tier list is looking pretty good. If you guys disagree or think that we made some mistakes or want to add to anything that we may have said or lack thereof, make sure to leave a comment. And yeah, cheers. Thanks, Gong, for coming along. That was fun.
yeah,
Actually,
I can
really enjoyable.
talk for a while. So
Yeah, no,
talk
absolutely.
about the game a lot. Love the game.
It's good.
So.
I'm pretty happy with our tier list. I think it's pretty. Other than the 4 specs down below, which sort of makes me want to maybe play some Feral. I don't know, survival. I think that it looks pretty good.
Yeah, I'd say it's. I don't think there's anything too crazy, too much of an outlier. Sub is a god spec at the minute, and destruction is in need of help. But everything in between, I think, is probably about where it needs to be. If you guys have some outliers, let us know. If you're the best Shadow Priest in the world and you saw this and you're offended that I put you in C tier, let us know.
Yeah, I'm sure. For sure, the best Shadow Priests in the world are coming over here to watch the tier list. That's for sure. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up here, Egon.
Yep. All right. Well,
Perfect.
thanks for having me.
Let's go play some WoW.